Welcome to Future Customer Value, where global thought leaders share their career-defining moments.
Thank you, everyone, for joining our latest episode of Future Customer Value. Got a very special guest here on the show today, Scott Wilder, who's got an incredible experience, and I'm excited to speak with you today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, before we dive into the conversation, I want to give the audience a quick view into Scott's, I'm going to call it illustrious career. You probably worked at every name brand tech company that a lot of the world knows, and it's pretty impressive. And every time I talk to Scott and we talk about customer success, he's always reminded me that I'm a marketer. I'm actually a marketer who's found my way into the customer experience world. And I think it's such a unique lens because very few folks who have come from marketing are now in the customer experience world. So with that, Scott started off his career and journey at Intuit, spending almost a decade there, ending up as a GM of the e-commerce and digital marketing unit, built a great community, and you described it as foundational moment in your career to set the stage. So we're definitely going to dive into your experiences at Intuit. Following that, Scott spent time at Google, Marketo, and Adobe, owning various product marketing functions and for both B2B and B2C SaaS. Then you took a different course into the ed tech world, interestingly, at Coursera and Udacity, running the global marketing function at both of these organizations. So another interesting angle on the world that a lot of folks in B2B don't always get. After Udacity, Scott came back into the B2B world with a company we're all very intimately familiar with, HubSpot, as the global head of community and engagement. And then most recently, after HubSpot, Scott spent some time as an advisor at G2, also at Base, but currently Scott is the head of digital success at Clari, which is a leading revenue operations and forecasting platform. I've actually used Clari in my past lives, so the
Nice.
solution it's coming up and becoming very enterprise grade, and a lot of revenue leaders are using it. So Scott, I will turn it over to you. Would love for you to share with the audience what you're up to at Clari.
Yeah, I think it's important. When I left HubSpot and then I was at Base, one of the things I was thinking about is how do you follow the money in terms of organizations, which organization is working with money, working with the revenue, generating revenue, and then secondly, which one could put me in a role where I can really help digitalize or go more digital in their plays. I also saw some trends that were interesting, like customer marketing and community, great roles, really enjoyed it. But I think if you're on LinkedIn, you can see that roles are being really impacted by the economy and by AI and all these other things. So I wanted to focus on revenue, wanted to focus on a digital play, and then understand roles that either have been defined or are emerging. So just like a few years ago, I focused more on customer marketing when that was emerging, and then, like as I said, it was hit a little bit by the economy and AI. So digital success. So now I'm at Clari doing digital success. Some key things about that is I don't report into customer success. I report to the chief customer officer. And that's important because I work really closely with account management. I work really closely with marketing. There's many different groups in the company that really play a key role in all this. I mean, I know, people who are doing digital talk about alignment, cross collaboration, things like that. So this is, you really want to think about where the center of gravity is. And just to take a little detour here, when I was at Marketo, the center of gravity was marketing operation, revenue operations, marketing operations, MOPS. And at Clari, it's around, the revenue and helping people with revenue. And then two is the center of gravity is, it's really important from a marketing and sales perspective. So I wanted to have that flexibility internally, and also understand the customers. And, it's funny, each group kind of collects their own data in different ways.
Yes.
And so I also wanted to, talk about being customer facing and really understanding, collecting that information, collecting customer data and VOC at different parts of the journey. So I'd make a long story shorter. So we really focus on four areas. One is platforms. And so that is the knowledge base, community, LMS, Pendo, and email. I'm sure I'm forgetting something there. Two is content. So we have tons of content. Organizations have tons of content, but how do you really mine that content and serve it up in a digital format? And that's like targeting the personas, targeting a product level, et cetera. The last thing is next thing is the ecosystem, right? So you have it's funny, again, marketing might be focusing on cabs and advocacy programs, and another group might be doing XYZ. So we try and bring a lot of that together. And then the last part, which I'm most excited about, is self-serve in the product. So that could be a product feature. I'm not in the product group, so just working with them on what those features are, and then how do we communicate that self-serve play using a Pendo or a WalkMe, or et cetera.
I think HubSpot does a really good job of that, where there's so many features. And I was actually going back through an interview with Dharmesh for one of the interviews he did back in the day. And initially HubSpot started off as this build all these tools to capture various marketing needs, and I think that's led to a very self-serve model. So curious to hear your experiences at HubSpot and how that's played into your world at Clari. We'll get into that.
This podcast is brought to you by Foresight, a full-service value realization platform designed to help you unlock growth in every single account. For more information on Foresight, please email them at info@gainforesight.co. That is info@gainforesight.co, and they'll be in touch.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Scott, for providing some context there. And want to start off our conversation with a foundational experience that you had. And you had mentioned, in our pre-call, that leaders have one company that influences their DNA, right? And that one for you was Intuit. And so take us back to when Scott Cook was running the show in early 2000s, delivering on this customer-led innovation philosophy. How did you develop programs and campaigns and products? How did you breathe that into your day-to-day? Paint that picture for us.
Yeah. So where to start? So I do believe that you usually have one company that influences your DNA the most. And for me, it was Intuit. And you hear that a lot when people speak about, they'll often say, well, I was at this company, or I was at that company. And Intuit did some things that were pretty magical. One was they really trained everybody to be a good leader. And that means all levels of the company. The second thing is, and we'll focus on that, is this customer-driven innovation approach. And so we had basically leaders in the company teaching us about how to be customer-focused. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious, but so how do you interact with a customer? How do you learn from the customer? How do you use that information? And customer-driven innovation is really focused on solving a customer, figuring out what the unsolved problem is the customer has. I mean, some people call it jobs to be done, but it's a little bit more than that. It's like they wanted to do X, but they couldn't do X. And then two is, solve that issue beyond their expectations through, design and delight. And then three is having that feedback loop. And so some of the ways they approached it, I talked about, like, training teams and how to think that way. Two is cross-functional. It's funny, we talk about growth, growth teams, growth squads, but having cross-functional teams that are focused on the same problem and being really clear about what that problem is. And then co-developing with a customer as well. And so, I think, when we talked earlier, I told you about how I used to invite customers to my staff meeting and share with them the problems we're trying to tackle, and then get them involved in the process. And there was one or two times, I'm not lying here, where the customer said, well, maybe I can help develop part of that for you.
Yeah.
So we all talk about, co-developing with customers, but I think bringing them into the lab, so to speak, with you is really key. And then one of the first times that came to market is, Scott Cook, actually there were two issues. One was when I was heading up e-commerce and digital, all the product managers, all the sales guys, all the marketing guys wanted lots of content on the website. Scott, create this content. And I think as digital success people, we run into this problem a little bit, but so I'll get to that. But so one solution when we came up with was, let's leverage what I had done in the past with community and go and really lean into user created content. And so really saying, okay, customers, here's what we're trying to solve. Here's what we're trying to communicate. Can you help us figure out how we can, solve it or communicate it, whether it's customer created video or, a community post, etc. And this was 2002. And so there wasn't a lot of support to just go do this. So talking to my manager, Elliot, we basically said, okay, let's fire up a server and try it out. And it quickly caught fire. Intuit targets small businesses. Small businesses were dying to learn from each other. Small businesses wear many hats, and so they need help. And then from an ecosystem perspective, we had this pro advisor accountant program. So accountants could actually jump on the community and answer their questions. So we did that. And then in parallel with that, there was another initiative about like, how do we tie this to the product? And so something was born, something called Live Community was born. And that was integrating basically community into the product. And it really, to be honest, it really baffles me why more companies are not doing this. So this is not just links to the community. Like, if you go to HubSpot, you'll see that we have links to the community. This was, and I'll use the example of, for those folks that are in the States, and it's like those folks in the States, those folks who do their own taxes, and those folks that use TurboTax. Okay, so if you use TurboTax and do your taxes, as you go through your workflow, you can actually read threads from the community and or post to the community from there. So you think the community is like a hub, and then the hub is leading into all these satellite products. So in TurboTax, again, you could go, V1 was you could just post a question and get an answer right there while you're in the product. So if the question was, oh my God, like what's the advantages of W-2 versus a 1099? You could see the answer there. So then the next question, which is very similar to what we deal with today in AI, is what's the credibility of that answer, or the credibility of the person who's providing the response? And so the next thing we did was we invited the pro advisors to answer these questions. And the next thing we did is we created like an expert locator, so you could actually identify an answer person, an advisor, a accountant, who you want to help you. So you might say, I sell shoes, and so I want somebody who has experience with shoes and accounting. Like,
Yeah.
small universe.
Let me ask you a question there, which is, how did that impact the value that your customers are getting? Seems pretty obvious that folks who are doing their taxes get value from it. Did you measure that? Did you quantify that somehow?
Yeah, we did. So classic net promoter scores, but then we also we looked at ARR. So we got feedback directly from the customers in terms of, net promoter scores, CSAT, also, and showed them like when we got the feedback, how we used it. So that was really important, like closing the loop, which is another key attribute of customer-driven innovation. So that's how the customer got it. And from our side, we could see that it was driving higher ARR, renewal, et cetera. But customers loved it because there was, they didn't have to pay for support. They didn't have to pay for an answer. They got the answer from somebody like them. That was really key as well. Like, I think a lot of times, I'll call Xfinity and say I have a problem with the product, and I feel like they don't really know the product well, or, they don't know. It's funny. They might not know, like, how to configure a router or something like that. Right. So there's the nuance was they were getting answers from people just like them. Right. Like, I sell, for all intents and purposes, Clari, but I'm not in Clari every day. So they were getting answers from people who were in QuickBooks every day, who were using TurboTax every day. And so that was really key.
Wow. The point you made about the customers coming into your organization as well, I think is fascinating. So the customers are next to each other in the product, super helpful. And I can imagine how embedding all that content is very resourceful for them. But what about putting the customers next to your leaders in the organization? What impact did that have for the internal team to understand those jobs to be done, those challenges? How did that unfold?
So one nuance here is that, a lot of companies I've worked at, it's either the CS person, the salesperson, or like an executive that works with a customer. What we did is all the employees had to interact with customers. And the roots of this was a follow me home, and people can Google it, where in the old days, when you bought software in a store, you'd actually have an Intuit person outside who would follow you home, ask you if they can go into their house, and they would see what you do on your desktop, meaning your computer, and what you do at your desktop where you work, right? It was really important to understand all that. So, so all the employees adopted a company or did a follow me home. I think it's you're sitting there with the customer while they're using it. It's not like you do an NPS score and you read some text and they say, well, this widget, doesn't work. There's just something really magical, and you can even do it via Zoom, is hearing it from the customer, and having ownership in that customer with that customer. So again, the Intuit model, if my customer was, Mill Valley Bicycles or something, then I have an interest in helping them be successful because I'm interacting with them. There's the human aspect, right? So I'm interacting with them. But because I was assigned them or because I volunteered, I have an interest in helping them be successful. So I think it was tremendous. It's doing this so much, I've seen every kind of survey, every kind of net promoter score, and there's nothing more valuable than just getting on a Zoom with a customer. And you don't need to do a lot, maybe you need to do a lot to quantify if you're going to fix that widget because there's 100 requests. But having a conversation like this, I would be asking more questions if you were my customer, but there's nothing better than that. It was funny. One of the things in my career we don't talk about is I once worked in Hong Kong, and my research project at an ad agency, and my project was to understand how beer gets sold.
Oh,
right.
wow.
And so what I did is I went to all these bars before
Sounds like
hours,
a fun
after
project.
hours, no, before hours. But I really asked the barman or woman, like, how they decide which beer they buy. There's just something about getting behind the bar, literally, and talking to them, maybe even serving drinks so you understand the customers. And I just think digital is great. I'm going to be promoting digital 100% today, but you need to talk to customers. You need to get on the Zoom with them.
And so I want to dig in here a little bit. I hear this a lot, and obviously our platform and our companies in this space to help that engagement side happen. But
yeah,
what I hear a lot is people saying, we need to talk to customers, we need to talk to customers. But on the other hand, those same people are saying, that's not scalable. Our team's under-resourced. We don't have bandwidth, on and on and on. So what is what's the happy medium there? Bite the bullet and do it? Do you worry about scale? What is a way
yeah.
that companies can engage customers authentically and in a scalable way as well?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up because I found teams who just don't even know how to talk to customers, or there's something there. Like, I don't know, like, I think putting on my psychology hat, I think there's something deeper going on of why they're not talking to customers, whether it's stress about getting their jobs done, or whether it's time management, or whether it's hard to like figure out, what to talk to customers about. And I think a big opportunity is to really have that discovery and diagnostic conversation with them. So to answer your question, I'd bite the bullet and say, you have to talk to 10 customers. And that's what I do with my team. Like 95% of what we do can be digital. The CS team, and we'll maybe get into this, we can handle the human aspect, but you need to listen to a customer. Yeah.
I'm in full agreement there. Well, what in that scenario, you tell your team, hey, talk to 10 customers. What do you give them to talk about? Or what should they come back to you with and say, hey, here's what we talked to the customer about?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So we can talk about a customer problem that they should like really pull the thread on and really understand. I can provide them with a list of kind of discovery type of questions. Some of the companies I've been in, they've actually trained their employees on how to talk, like Intuit did this. So again, how do you interact with a customer? Like, what kind of questions do you ask? And it's a guidebook. It's not like the playbook, right? It's just like, you know, you can get to the destination how you want, but this is a suggestion. I think also, so I do these fireside chats with we have something called Clari coaches, which is a mentor-mentee type of program. I do these fireside chats. And so one of the things that I'm doing is, instead of watching the whole video, I'll just break it up into, you know, 5-minute videos, short videos, and I'll share it with the team, but I'll also say, this is what I learned from it. You know, I think as leaders, being humble and saying, you know, this is what I learned, or this is what surprised me. So, but I think it's a really, yeah, it's not easy. I have a, you know, at HubSpot, there's a superstar employee who just didn't talk to customers enough, you know, because, and we kind of pulled on the thread and it was like they weren't comfortable doing it. So I'm not saying it's easy.
And this is something I've heard a lot is, especially in CS, where we talk about value a lot, right? And customers need to get value. Organizations want to understand if the customer's getting value, but in order to understand that, you have to have a value talk. We call it the value talk, right? People are scared of the value talk because value is the language in which the organization team often talks about is different than what the customer cares about. And the classic distinction here is product features and functions versus business outcomes, or operational needs that the buyer has versus what your workflows are. And there's these two ends of the spectrum, but whenever they can come together and really join up, that's where the magic happens. And I think that's what a lot of organizations need to train on. You can't leave that to hope or assume that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'll give you a good use case. Just being transparent. So somebody today said, we need content for this topic, how the widget works. And that's based on the number of tickets that was open. It was based on CS feedback. So I said, that's great. But we need to really understand like what the questions are that are going back to the Intuit stuff, you know, what problems are not being solved. And then the next part is like, show me the verbatim. I think that is really key, is, you know, and, you know, your product helps with this. It's just like, you have to understand the problem from their words and then offer to solve it from their words. And that's really hard when you deal with multiple personas, et cetera. Like we deal with admin, we deal with sales managers, and we deal with sales reps, right?
Yeah. You've got the exec buyer, you got the champion, the end user. They all have different jobs to be done. They all have different outcomes they're trying to manage. You've got 50 of these accounts as a CX person, and you've got, you know, times 10 of stakeholders. So it gets it's a complicated task. And
yeah, and it's even hard internally. Like one of the things that's come up in our Clari coaching program, or on so the Clari circle, just to back up, is something we call ourselves self-serve. And so digital success is like what we think about it externally in the marketplace, but internally we call it digital self-serve. But I think externally self-serve means support more often. On these channels here, we're really trying to understand how people are talking about the products and how they're expressing their needs.
Yeah. It's that seems like a great channel to get that real-time feedback. Let's move on to the next story here, because you've got a bunch of awesome experiences from other companies as well. We'll keep tying it back to some of these central themes, but next one is Marketo and Adobe. So this was at the really critical time in the marketing landscape, when a lot of communities and education and a lot of, you know, customer hubs were popping up to provide information to marketers in this burgeoning field. So talk to us about, how did you become focused on transforming the .com site to the Marketing Nation platform? You had mentioned that being one of the key ahas during that time. So tell us about what that was and why that's important.
So just some context. So I worked at Marketo 2014 to 2017 or 18, and then there was a private equity buyout, and then they were sold to Adobe when they was, and so then I left and I went to Adobe, and then Adobe acquired Marketo. So when you work up and down Highway 101 in Silicon Valley, a lot of these things kind of merge together, these companies. But so I had done the Intuit community at the time was very well known, and then I went off and did community at Google. And while I was at Google, Sanjay, who was the CMO, asked to meet with me. He had been at Khoros before that, Lithium Khoros, and we were just brainstorming about like what community could look like for Marketo. And in our conversations, he told me that they have this big event called the Marketing Nation Summit, and that was the aha for me because one of the key things I've tried to do in my lather, rinse, repeat playbook is have an overarching theme for all these communities, these self-serve or digital success plays. So we talked about having the Marketing Nation go online and really build a community around that. And again, there's a lot of ingredients that were already there. Like they had a partner program that Lou ran called LaunchPoint, and partners would be really good to help answer questions on a community. They also, the Marketing Nation just had a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. The problem was, which often happens, is you have these big events, like Dreamforce, and then what happens afterwards? How do you keep the momentum going? So we really focused on keeping the momentum going. And then the next thing was stitching all this together, meaning LMS, the university community, the knowledge base and support, and saying, how can we create that into one experience? And quickly we realized that sounds like a big retention play. So that was focused on retention, and the .com really focused on acquisition. And I think you'll see that one problem I've noticed in all these years is the .com always focuses on top of the funnel. And then there's like a link here and there to bottom of the funnel support platforms,
Right.
etc. Right. But we had this idea that would be both kind of equal. And so we built out the Marketing Nation online. And I think some of the key things we did there is, again, some similar themes, is we had this expert locator so you could find partners, or there were a lot of Marketo consultants at the time. We had customer dedicated hubs. We also, and this was probably one of the first ones to do this, embedded the case to open a case inside the community platform. So there was no such thing as support per se. I mean, there was, but it wasn't a link. Like you went to the Marketing Nation if you needed an answer.
Yeah.
And the way we served it up was, first thing is, can you do your search, and can you see an answer from another community member? Then if not, you see it from the knowledge base. And if not, then you can open up a case. So, it wasn't like this big, put your question here and open up a case thing. We made it, a few hoops that you had to jump through, but it also helped because we also highlighted that you're going to get the answer from people like yourself. And the marketing, just tremendous results from that. Again, retention, it's directional. It's not like a direct correlation, but it was around 34% renewal for people who were in the Marketing Nation because of the marketing. I mean, there are other people who could renew too, but we kind of modeled out the lift.
Gotcha. And you would get access to the Marketing Nation if you were a customer of.
Yes. So
both.
unlike Clari today, which has opened to everybody, it was just for the customers and partners and consultants.
Gotcha. It's interesting. You talked about AI before, and feels like we're doing this full turn where now you can go into a AI bot that's pulled in all the community generated content, maybe answer your question. But back in the day, I mean, still today, right? There's folks who are on the forums, they're answering questions. It might be a little bit more latency to get the answer you're looking for, but you're getting it from another human being who's having this actual problem. So curious, little bit diversion here, but in this world of, if you had this real-time awesome community Marketing Nation of folks answering questions versus just the bot you could go into, is there a clear winner, or is there a melding of the two to provide that retention great experience?
Yeah, I think there's a melding of the two, but I think people still want to, they want to know the source. right? They want to know where the source, and of course, some of these bots, you can see the source, but you don't know the individual. Like, so there's a lot I want to know about you. I want to know, and this is what we did with Live Community. This is what we did at Marketo. Right at the point of need or the point of the question, you'd see not only like, Sagar answered the question, but I know like your level of expertise with Marketo or MOPS. I would know your company and your industry, right? And we're just not quite there in terms of AI. And then, AI also, and it's interesting, we're rolling out federated search and AI, but we're doing federated search first. And I think for another year or two, people are still going to be lean towards the search approach first. I use Google. Gemini shows its results at the top. And I still scroll down and look at what the search results are.
Yeah, yeah, fascinating. The source is still so important. People are, and there's this trade-off between convenience and truthfulness, and what is that? When is that going to start to shift? Right? Is going to be interesting. Maybe you'll have the expert leaders going through the AI generated content and marking, which ones are correct and treating the database that way too.
Well, that's something we're looking at is certainly for the top. So one of the things that, when you're stitching all these systems together is, and we had this at Marketo, we had this at Intuit, we'll have it soon here, is looking at the top searches, the top keywords, et cetera, across all platforms. And so then you take off the top 200, and then you can, at least for the next, whatever, X number, 18 months or whatever, have somebody internally just eyeball it and make sure that it's a legitimate answer. And then also you can merchandise, right? You can pin stuff to the top that you want people to focus on.
Yeah, that's great. But when you're talking about the search and the federated search, just to be clear, is this Clari's community searching through the community generated responses or another search?
This will be searching through all of Clarity's self-serve digital success properties and the marketing properties.
Got it. So when somebody asks you for that, what they ask you today of can you write up a piece on this or get us a piece on this? Well, that'll fall into the asset library where the search will go and pull out the right content.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go in a different direction. So, because we can use this for internal requests as well, right? Like, so the example I gave earlier when we have a content request, so we could use this AI or AI tool for that. But in terms of external, yeah, it would go into the federated search and AI search. So, but we want people to just kind of verify it at first. I mean,
yeah, we
have a sophisticated product, right? It's not like an Excel spreadsheet, right? And so, you're paying to be, our whole thing is like treating revenue as one of those key processes in the company, and it's your money. So you want to make sure the information you're getting is pretty precise.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. I think the use case for both the external self-serve content, but also internal knowledge bases. I've been seeing a lot of internal companies like Guru and other LMS systems that try to make that process more efficient too. Of how do you answer questions within the organization for sales process or for sales engineering, right? Solutions. There's a lot of those needs that pop up.
Yeah, when I was at Marketo, we licensed Jive for our knowledge base articles, our community, a number of things. And they had a product, Jive N, for internal, like community and knowledge, and external was Jive X or something. They were ahead of the game because they tied that together, right? So basically, whatever, now we're talking about whatever you kind of fine tune internally, figuring out when's the right time you share it externally. And there's another nuance here too, is for all these things is, especially internal or external, like what's the persona or the type of person that should have access to it? What I mean by that. So you have a bot. I'm an employee, you're a bot and I'm a customer. There's things I might see that a partner might not see, or vice versa, right? Yeah. So it's really, these bots, that's another nuance that we're working on, is based on your your persona or your role. What kind of content do we show you, whether it's via the search or via the bot?
Makes sense. There's a lot of both generative capabilities and already generated content that prioritize which one's going to be more relevant for the customer.
Yeah, I mean, my son and I share Gemini.google.com, and there's things I don't want him to see that so I have to like hide my previous searches.
Governance. Yeah.
Yeah. Governance is key.
Yeah, totally. That's funny. I can imagine a whole other conversation on that topic alone.
Don't worry, I don't go to any sites for alcohol, smoking, or porno or anything like that. Just
nice and clean. Awesome. Well, let's go to another story here, another part of your career when you were at HubSpot. And I think what was really interesting to me in our conversation was how you would talk about users, monthly active users, in terms of the platform versus holistically. It's looking at a product versus all the platforms and looking at monthly active users and how are you getting folks to engage at all the different levels of what HubSpot is, including the community. So talk to us about when you have that many users, right? It's probably one of the largest user bases out there for B2B. And when you have the scale of millions of users, what is the key metric that you're trying to drive towards, and what are some of the focus areas within your processes of keeping those customers?
Yeah, so I think the one important thing is, and it's funny we're talking about personas and roles, is making it clear which path people can go down based on their persona or their role, or as some folks at HubSpot like to say, picking your own journey. And so being really clear, because when people are coming to your site, they're not the same type of people, especially when they're selling so many types of products. So I think that's one thing that's really important. In terms of measuring success, so if I put on my DS hat only, at the end of the day, engagement for me is like the key metric, because I find that all boats will rise with that metric tide, or something like that. And so the engagement across all the platforms. So really looking at how often does Scott Wilder customer engage on community versus the LMS versus in product, right? And so some of the things I was working on there was like, which we do today, is assigning an engagement score, across all platforms. And then the second thing we looked at is the lift of people in those platforms, whether it's one platform or two. What's the lift when it comes to ARR? And so we saw a substantial increase.
That's so a question there, and I want to pose this from the perspective of how effective is engagement? If you were to model out a predictive curve of all the variables that would predict retention at HubSpot, or company that size, how much of that would be explained by the engagement itself, right? Is engagement directly correlated? Is it like 10%, 50%?
Yeah, that's a really hard one. I'm not going to, say that it's a hard thing to really quantify. One of the things we did was, so we know from the advocacy program, there was a 55% higher retention rate for customers. So the next thing to do is look at the time, time spent on these platforms, right? And, you can say that, these guys are spending more time, they're spending more. So it's inferred, I'm not going to, it's not a one-to-one correlation. You're certainly going to have the salesperson say, well, wait a minute, I influenced the revenue there. So totally.
What do you think, taking that Intuit experience of observing your customers and when they're on their laptops and talking to the customer, those programs, how can organizations do that at the size of HubSpot? Is it still picking out one or two customers here and there, every day and talking to them, or are there other ways to to glean that?
I believe you can still do it. They're talking to 10 customers. Now, it might be 10 customers in 5 segments, so maybe 50 customers, and you have a divide and conquer approach with the team, right? But I believe you can still do that, and you should do it. I mean, Intuit had millions of customers when I was there, right? You know, think of, I don't know what the percentage of small businesses that use QuickBooks or Quicken or TurboTax, but same methodology that I used 15, 20 years ago today. You know, it's just, yeah. And I'm not saying like, you know, net promoter scores or surveys aren't, they're helpful, but there's some challenges with them. Like one is, do you use the data? That's one big thing. Two is, what I've learned over time is where you ask that question really influences the answer. So if I ask the question, a net promoter score, or if I ask like which digital success or self-serve tools do you use, and I ask the question in the product, I'll get one answer. If I ask it on the community, I'll get another answer. And if I use it, ask in the university. The second thing is, just along those lines, is that I also found that the first self-serve tool people used was the one that they were likely to stick with for a while. So
yeah, that's there's so many different ways that I think folks will engage. I'm thinking about our own platform, and we're asking folks through email and other solutions, but I never really thought about it through where you ask, where you meet your customers is going to influence how they feel or what their perception might be.
yeah,
You kind of give
context
control
is
for all
so
that.
key.
Yeah.
Context is so key. Like, you know, again, the TurboTax stuff, we asked, community was integrated with the product. It was all contextual. It was all, so, you know, obviously they were on the W-2 page or whatever, 1099. And so all the questions would be around that, but it was all relevant. And then, you know, my learning through that was just, let's test it out. And so even today at Clari, I'll ask the same question in multiple channels. And it's really interesting to look at the answers.
It's a cool experiment. Have the bot go and see which ones are more authentic answers or represent the broader whole. Awesome.
Exactly.
Well, let's we're gonna shift here, Scott, to the next section of the show here, which is a favorite of the audience. Folks love hearing these rapid fire questions and rapid fire answers. So I'm gonna, getting ready, getting warmed up. I'm going to hit you with 8 questions, and I want you to do your best to keep it to the first thought that comes to your mind, 1 to 2 words each. All right.
Okay.
A lot of people want to go into long sentences and explanations here, which is great, but try to keep it to 1 to 2 words, which will keep it nice and punchy. So I'm going to broaden the questions. Initially, these are customer success focused, but given that you've been in marketing and digital success, I'm going to just keep it customer experience. Right.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. What's the best metric of success for customer experience?
Cross-platform engagement metric. So like digital success, we look at engagement across all platforms.
Awesome.
That's one number.
Yeah. Wow. It's similar to the HubSpot model, I guess.
Yeah.
What's the worst metric for success in customer experience?
Worst metric. The worst metric is, I'm going to say CSAT, because most people don't do anything with CSAT.
Only as good as you use it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people say NPS for that one too. What's the most underrated part of customer experience?
Most underrated part is, it's crazy. I just don't think we put enough attention on adoption and onboarding and adoption. Like, I know you want a one-word answer, but one of my beefs is I've been in so many companies where we build out the customer journey and then nobody looks at it again or updates it for a year. And, you know, it just kind of sits there in this virtual closet, so to speak. So I think most underrated is just keep focusing on the initial experience, the onboarding experience.
Love that. What's the most overrated part of customer experience?
The CSMs can solve every problem. It's not true.
Takes a team. Nothing
Takes a village.
Yes, nothing of significance is done alone. It's a quote I come back to often. What is the current state of customer experience?
I think we're leaning fast towards AI solving everything, and I think that I still think you need to talk to a customer one-on-one. It's been a big theme today, and I see it, and I'll be presumptuous here and say that I think maybe there's also kind of this, I don't know what COVID did, but it made us less inclined to talk to a customer.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. What's
Yeah.
the future of customer experience?
Well, back in my day, they came out with something called an ATM machine. And when at first the ATM machine came out, everybody's like, this is never going to work. I want people to hand me money. I think the same thing is going to be, these digital success plays. I think that I'm leaning heavily into it. I think that's where it's going to go. Yeah.
Nice. What is the best book or podcast that you listen to in this world? It could be outside of it too, but
Yeah. Well, I'm a big New York Yankees fan, so baseball. So I listen to like 5 Yankee podcasts. But I'm going to plug Rod Cherkas's book on Chief Customer Officer. So Rod and I work together at Marketo and Intuit very
oh,
closely.
nice. Well, it's sitting on my shelf right now. I peruse it every couple of weeks. Let me ask you another one. So you mentioned there's communities that maybe under where you'd want to be. What is a community that has totally blown you away in the past or at any point in time?
Yeah. The Google AdWords community is pretty powerful. It's really well, I haven't been on it recently, but it's really well done in terms of you have a business problem, which is these small businesses who sell AdWords, right? And then you have a huge ecosystem of Google AdWords consultants and agencies. So that perfect match of, think about it like the platform paradigm of the providers and the suppliers, right? And so that Google AdWords community, which then expanded to analytics as well.
I gotcha. It's a good example. I've not heard that one before. All right. Well, we're gonna come to the final question here, Scott, of the episode. This show's called Future Customer Value. So we're gonna ask you to make a prediction about the future of the industry. And it can be about anything related to enterprise software. I'm not gonna pin you to, CS or marketing or whatnot, but where do you think we're going? Where do you think our industry is headed?
Yeah, I think 2 years from now, your homepage, the front door to the digital experience will be that chat bot or search function. It will look more like what Google looks like today with Gemini. And that will be the front door to the customer or the prospect's experience.
Chat UI. Coming closer every single day. Awesome. Well, before we wrap, is there anything, Scott, you'd like to plug with the audience? Any content you've got coming out? Any other podcasts you're going to be on, books? How can they find out more about you?
Yeah, I answer everything on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn. Also, circle.clari.com is the front door to a lot of these digital success plays. And then in terms of books, I've been wanting to write a book for a while, so I've been thinking about a book in terms of like digital success, but we'll see. Right now, I'm focused on my work, my family, and Little League baseball.
All right. We'll have to get into Scott, the individual at some point and learn about your interest. Seems like baseball is a central theme here. Awesome, Scott. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. I'm sure our audience will too. And it's been a pleasure. Looking forward to round 2.
Thank you for having me.
Once again, thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you by Foresight. If you're interested in learning more, please email them at info@gainforesight.co. That is info@gainforesight.co. Thank you.